And based on the opponents for the upcoming schedule, the Browns have the easiest 2026 schedule.
First good thing for the Browns is the strength of schedule rankings have been put out by the NFL. And check it out. At the very bottom of this photo, the Cleveland Browns are right there with the easiest schedule in the NFL. Win percentage 4-2-9.
Something doesn't add up with the Cleveland Browns right now, and it's got fans split right down the middle. On one hand, you've got a team coming off a rough season, still dealing with major questions at quarterback, still trying to prove they're not stuck in the same cycle. But on the other hand, there's this stat floating around that changes the entire conversation. According to one metric, the Browns are about to walk into the easiest schedule in the entire NFL in 2026. And the moment that dropped, everything shifted. Because now the question isn't just are the Browns good, it's do they finally have the perfect setup to win? Because when you look at the numbers, it sounds almost too good to be true. Based on opponent win percentages from last season, the teams Cleveland will face had a combined winning percentage of just .429. That's the lowest in the league. Lowest. Not middle of the pack, not slightly easier, the absolute easiest on paper. And if you're a Browns fan, you're looking at that thinking, this might finally be the break you've been waiting for. But if you've watched this team long enough, you already know it's not that simple.
More than a lot of people are, is because I look at just how this team performed last year and how everybody told me how bad this team was. They still were in a lot of these games, and they still won 5 games.
And that's exactly where the debate starts, because some people are already jumping to the conclusion that this is an 8, 9, maybe even 10-win team now. You hear it everywhere. Analysts, fans, even people close to the team saying, look, they were competitive last year, they've upgraded the roster, now give them a softer schedule, and suddenly things look very different. And on the surface, that logic makes sense, but the deeper you go, the more complicated it gets. Because here's the reality nobody wants to admit. There is no such thing as an easy schedule in the NFL. It doesn't exist the way people think it does. This isn't college football where you can circle games months in advance and call them guaranteed wins. Every single Sunday in the NFL is a fight. Teams change, rosters flip, coaching staffs adjust, and what looked like an easy opponent in May can turn into a nightmare by October.
Warren Sharp's model for predicting schedules, and the Browns came in as the 4th easiest schedule, but the NFL just put one out based on last year's win percentage, and the Browns have the easiest schedule. So some opponents that Cleveland will face next season that were part of a losing record last year include the Las Vegas Raiders.
Here's the part nobody is talking about. Those win percentages everyone is using to call this schedule easy are based on last year's teams, not this year's. And that matters more than anything, because every single season there are teams that completely flip their identity. You get new coaches, new systems, breakout players, and suddenly a team that won 5 games is winning 10. It happens every year. So when you say the Browns have the easiest schedule, what you're really saying is they have the easiest schedule based on outdated information. But that doesn't mean the opportunity isn't real, because when you zoom out and look at Cleveland's situation, there's a path here. There's a real path to being competitive. Last season, even with all the chaos, all the injuries, all the inconsistency, they were still in games. They weren't getting blown out every week. They were right there, hanging around, finding ways to stay competitive even when things weren't going their way. And that's where the optimism comes from, because now you're adding pieces. You're investing heavily in the offensive line. You're bringing in new weapons at wide receiver. You're expecting growth from key players like Quinshon Judkins and Harold Fannin Jr. And you're pairing all of that with a defense that, when it's locked in, can be one of the best in the league. So the thinking becomes simple. If this team was already competitive in bad conditions, what happens when things start going right? This is where it gets dangerous, because expectations start rising faster than reality. The moment people hear easiest schedule, they start projecting wins. They start circling games. They start talking about division titles. And that's where Browns fans have been burned before, because this franchise has a history of looking better on paper than it does on the field. And until that changes, skepticism is always going to be part of the conversation.
I just think with the Browns, they've done everything they can as far as make the necessary changes around the quarterback.
Now let's talk about the biggest factor in all of this, because it's impossible to ignore: the quarterback situation. You can break down the schedule all you want. You can talk about roster improvements. You can highlight defensive strengths. But at the end of the day, everything comes back to one position. And right now, that position is still a question mark for Cleveland.
Include the Las Vegas Raiders, who had the #1 overall pick. That was Shedeur's first start last year when we faced them, and we won that game.
Whether it's
Deshaun Watson trying to rediscover his form, Shedeur Sanders stepping into a bigger role, or someone else emerging from the depth chart? The reality is, the Browns don't have a clear answer yet, and that's why some people refuse to buy into the easy schedule narrative, because no matter how favorable your opponents look on paper, if your quarterback play isn't consistent, none of it matters. At the same time, there's another side to that argument, because in recent years, we've seen teams succeed without elite quarterback play. Teams that rely on strong defenses, effective run games, and smart coaching to win games. And that's the model some people believe Cleveland can follow. Build a system that doesn't require your quarterback to be Superman every week. Put them in positions to succeed, limit mistakes, control the game, and let the rest of the roster do the heavy lifting. And that's where Todd Monken becomes such a key piece in this entire puzzle, because his rack tracker shows he knows how to adapt. He's worked with different types of quarterbacks, different offensive systems, and found ways to make them productive. That's the hope in Cleveland right now, that he can take whatever quarterback emerges and build something around their strengths instead of forcing a system that doesn't fit. This is where young players usually make a mistake. They assume improvement is automatic just because the situation looks better. It's not. Every piece has to come together at the right time. The offense has to click early, the defense has to stay consistent, the coaching staff has to establish a clear identity, and most importantly, the team has to believe that this season is actually different, because that mindset matters more than people think. If the Browns come out early in the season and struggle offensively, even for a couple of games, that doubt creeps back in, that feeling of here we go again, and once that happens, it becomes harder to recover. But if they come out strong, if they find success early, everything changes. Confidence builds, momentum builds, and suddenly that easy schedule starts to look like an opportunity instead of a trap. And that brings us to the defensive side of the ball, which might actually be the most important factor in all of this, because for Cleveland to take advantage of this schedule, the defense has to be elite. Not just good, not just solid, elite. Top 5 in the league. The kind of defense that can win games on its own. The kind that forces turnovers, scores points, and puts the offense in favorable positions. We've seen it before. Teams with dominant defenses and average quarterback play can still make deep runs. The 2017 Jaguars are the perfect example. They didn't have a superstar quarterback, but their defense carried them all the way to the AFC Championship. And that's the blueprint some people see for Cleveland. Control the game defensively, run the ball effectively, and make just enough plays on offense to win. But even that approach has its risks, because if the defense slips, even slightly, everything else gets exposed. If they're not creating turnovers, if they're not getting stops in key moments, then suddenly the pressure shifts back to the offense, and we're right back to the same question: can the quarterback deliver? Now add in the wild card factors. Players like Jeudy, who have shown flashes but struggled with consistency. Players who need the right environment to stay engaged and productive, because with someone like Jeudy, it's not just about talent, it's about rhythm, it's about confidence. And if the offense can get him involved early, keep him active, and build that confidence, he becomes a weapon. But if things start slow, if the offense stalls, that production can disappear just as quickly. And that's why the early part of the schedule is going to be so important, not just in terms of wins and losses, but in terms of identity. This team needs to establish who they are quickly. They can't afford to spend half the season figuring things out, because even with an easy schedule, time runs out fast in the NFL. So when you put it all together, you get a situation that's both exciting and uncertain at the same time. Yes, the Browns have the easiest schedule based on one metric. Yes, the roster looks improved. Yes, there's a path to being competitive, but none of that guarantees anything, because in this league, potential doesn't win games, execution does. And that leads to the real question: is this easiest schedule in the NFL actually the opportunity Cleveland needs to turn things around, or is it just another setup for expectations that this team still isn't ready to meet?